You have been a creative writer before, but maybe you could talk a little bit about this one, People Without Shame, and also about your creative work before and how they all tend to be drawn from or inspired by your long-standing scholarly works on topics like colonialism, trauma, South Asia, and other things.
Yeah, well, it's certainly the case that my work on, well, I had jotted down post-colonial literature, but I'd say even more Indian literature, in Indian myth, Indian orature, as well as literature, has inspired my creative work in countless ways. It's doesn't have anything to do with cognitive science per se, but when I started reading Indian literature in Indian, especially Indian mythology, and epic and so on, early Indic works, um, I I felt an immediate affinity with it that I never had really felt with most Greco-Roman work. Um, Maybe it was in part just the time in my life when I was reading it. I read it much later than I read. I mean, I was in my 20s and 30s rather than in my teens, which is when I would have read Greek and Roman mythology. Um, but my first creative publication, well, book-length publication was a retelling of stories, goddess stories from the Puranas. And my novel, it includes what I've tried to do is synthesize aspects of a number of different literary traditions and um, non-literary historical circumstances in order to make a sort of generic colony, a colony that had specific details. It wasn't just generic, but that it was identifiable by pieces as having its sources in various real colonies, but it wasn't as a whole identifiable as any one colony. So, I mean, one whole set of things in the novel comes from Nigeria, and the sort of tripartite ethnic division of Nigeria is reflected in the tripartite ethnic division of Samota, the fictional country where People Without Shame takes place. The novel concerns a linguistic anthropologist who is recruited to one of these scientific missions in a British colony in sub-Saharan Africa. And he goes, and he's not an enthusiast for colonialism when he goes, but he isn't nearly as skeptical of it as he should be. And he discovers in the course of his time there, in interacting with the local people, that colonialism has been as bad as he should have expected it to be when he went there. And in any case, his about half the novel concerns his interactions with people and what he's doing, and his interactions with the colonial administrators and so on. And the other half of the novel is a set of his translations of Samotan works. And one large group of those translations, about half of the material, maybe a little more than half of that devoted to translations, is devoted to translation of this epic. The epic comments on the colonial situation in Samota indirectly. So it isn't very hard to figure out what it's, I think it isn't very hard to figure out what its commentary suggests about the colonial government and so on. But in any event, that's about a quarter of the novel. This is all related to the Indian influence because that epic combines several different stories, the story of Exodus from the Hebrew Bible, for example, but it also takes something that either of you would notice if you read through the translations of the epic about many specifics of the story are drawn from the Karna's sub story of the Mahabharata, and that I guess like Tagore, although I don't remember his essay on Karna and Kunti that well, but I guess like Tagore, it was for me it was a not to compare myself to Tagore, mind you, but just in this one little aspect that I was it was perhaps particularly moving to him as it was to me, um, so that it was it stood as a particularly powerful exemplar of a series, a wide range of ways in which societies can discard individuals. Um, anyway, I won't go into that anymore. Um, the other thing well, yeah, and yes, of course, my work on colonialism and different colonies, including Ireland, which I had worked on before, working on Indian and Sub-Saharan Africa and so on, has informed the novel. But at the same time, I feel that the sort of imagination or simulation, to go back to an earlier question, that this forced me to engage in, that I had to imagine details. I sort of set myself the task of putting this highly educated Irish person from a Republican family, that is Republican not in the sense of the United States, but in the sense of Ireland, which is to say a revolutionary family opposed to British colonialism. Um, yeah, someone from Ireland, from a Republican family in Ireland, who goes to the colony and what he does when he discovers what it's actually like there. And it just forced me to imagine things in detail, in human detail, in a way that I wouldn't have done just in looking at in analyzing. So even though they're literary works and the literary works themselves involved their authors imagining in great detail, in sympathetic detail, the conditions of colonial life. Um, you don't think about it in the same way when you're reading somebody else's imagination, transcript of an imagination, and when you're imagining it yourself. So it goes in both directions, both from the post-colonial academic study to the novel and from the novel to the academic study.